Okay, welcome to the Happily Different podcast, where we unpack the interesting and unorthodox ways people approach their businesses and their lives. The mission of this show is to learn as much as we can from the people who weren't afraid to go their own way. My name is Ryan Jaskowitz, and I'm your host, as well as CEO of 12-5 Capital, a non-bank finance company helping companies accelerate the progress they are trying to make in their businesses and in their lives. Today's guest is a friend and colleague of mine, here to chat about all things business, life, family, and the decisions we make along the way. He's a Syracuse Orange grad. Our guest has worked in almost every facet of the finance industry, most recently at a Texas-based bank, and through his learnings has a lot to teach us about various different businesses he's seen along the way. Steven Katz, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here.
We're super pumped to have you and excited to dive in a little bit to your life and whatnot. So in some of my research, which as you can imagine, we're not interviewing celebrities on this, or not many celebrities on this podcast. So in the little research I'm able to do on folks, I read that you were a teenage entrepreneur, but I couldn't find out what that business was. I couldn't find it anywhere online. So can you share a little story around that business as we kick off here?
Of course, I'd be glad to. And I strategically put my computer where it is, so I have in the background kind of the source of my entrepreneurial spirit, at least when I was younger. So
Cool.
When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I started becoming interested in baseball, really interested in baseball, following everything as I possibly could, buying publications. And then that kind of morphed into baseball cards. And I'd go to my local candy store and buy the baseball cards. And, I wasn't the type of kid who would put them in the bike spokes. I really liked them as more or less a piece of art and try to keep them in really good condition and really just, treasure them actually. And as I got a little older, I decided that, maybe I can make some kind of business out of these baseball cards. So with the help of my father, who drove me around, I placed ads in a local newspaper, the Riverdale Press. I'm from Riverdale, which is just outside of New York City in the Bronx.
Cool.
I put an ad in the Riverdale Press, basically looking to buy baseball cards. And I had my own kind of secret weapon, which was the baseball card price guide. And it was put out every month, and you could buy that at the candy store also. Most people who had baseball cards didn't have the same interest level that I had. So I kind of had a leg up on basically what the prices were, indications of if those prices were going to go up or down. So put an ad in the paper, and lo and behold, I received quite a few calls. And every week I would go visit. My dad would drive me around. My parents were divorced. So my father would come visit on certain days, and he would drive me around to these areas just within Riverdale. I would look at the cards, look at the condition, which is very important, even more important these days. And I would look at the price guide, and, if it was worth $10, I'd make an offer of $4 or $5. Not trying to rip anybody off, of course, but Obviously I'm a businessman. I've got to make a profit.
Got to make a spread.
So I accumulated a fair amount of baseball cards, and I actually made up business cards too, SAK baseball cards. My middle name is Andrew.
That's awesome.
And went around buying cards. And I'd say about 2 or 3 years later, as I amassed quite a collection, I started to go to baseball card shows throughout the New York City area.
Oh, no way.
And
Cool.
I would buy cards, and then realized that I can actually be a seller as well. And you could buy a table for a certain amount of money, lay out everything on the table, and basically sell your wares. Just like
awesome.
At a flea market or anywhere
Yeah,
else.
A garage sale. Yeah.
Exactly. So I made some money buying and selling baseball cards. And
That's
I
really
did
cool.
that for, after a while, I'd say when I got to about 16 or 17, my interest started to go more towards girls.
Other things,
of course. But ultimately, I kept a lot of the baseball cards, as you can see. I do also have a pretty big collection up in the attic and within binders in kind of these little plastic things that you
Oh,
keep
I
them
know
safe
that.
in.
I remember the plastic things. I was just going to ask. So what? Because I feel like I'm one of the. I still see baseball cards and things of that nature at like even Target. You can buy them now, but you never hear any of the kids talking about trading baseball cards or anything like that. And but I'm 39, and so even when I was growing up, it was a huge thing for us. You know, we all thought we were going to get rich off of
Oh
baseball
yeah,
cards, right?
so did I.
Who's got the Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card? Who's got, you know? So what years ballpark were these? Is this? I mean, it's kind of like the golden era of baseball trading cards, no?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I'm 56. So when I was, in my early teenage years, it was the late 70s and early
Mm-hmm.
80s. And I bought a lot of cards from that era, obviously, because the people I was buying from had the cards from that recent time.
Mm-hmm.
So the highlights from those years are Eddie Murray, who was a rookie during that time.
Uh-huh.
And Ricky Henderson
Mm-hmm.
was 1980. And so, those are just a few. And their cards, not only their rookie cards, but their subsequent cards are also very popular as well. But when I started going to baseball card shows, for some reason I got in my head that having the rookie cards as many players as possible was going to be worth the most money.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that was correct and still is.
Yeah.
So you can't really see on the wall the specific names up there, but I have Pete Rose's rookie from 1963.
Oh, nice.
I've got.
I was going to say, what's your most famous? Well, yeah. What would you say is the most? Two questions: most interesting, and then most valuable dollars wise.
Well, the way I think of interesting is basically from their work of art perspective. How kind they are to the eye, and how it's laid out, how the card is laid out. So I would say the 1955 Sandy Koufax rookie, I think, answers both the questions. I think it's probably worth the most, and it's most pleasing to the eye. It really is. It's like a portrait, and it looks like a painting. Obviously it's not, but I have the one to that side is all rookies, and the other side is just like really good cards. Cool. Again, I've got Collier Stremski, I've got Gaylord Perry, I've got some old Willie Mays cards. So they have been sitting up in that type of display case for many, many years. I think since I moved into my house, which is now 25 years.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's cool.
And I was fortunate enough to kind of get my kids into baseball cards also when they were younger.
Oh, neat.
And I took them to some shows. They ultimately didn't have the same amount of interest that I had. But to me, my wife's sick of them because to be honest, I'm actually sitting at her desk right now. And whenever she's on
so
calls
she has
like
to deal with them.
she has to deal with them. She gets questions all the time. And she's obviously not a big baseball card fan. She's a huge baseball fan, which is a great thing for us, but not a big baseball fan.
Interesting. Okay. So that was your entrepreneurial endeavor in those early days. You talked about growing up in Riverdale. I don't know a lot about that area. How did it shape you? You know, that combined with, I think you said your parents were divorced. How do you think that shaped you? I don't know, going into adulthood and kind of where you're at now.
I think it got me to become more independent. For whatever reason, I felt like I was kind of more on my own in my early teens. My mother was primarily raising two kids. She was home. My dad did come visit quite a bit, but he also married a woman that had two kids of her own. So he was kind of, managing two families. Yeah. And my mom was also obviously just house stuff. She worked sometimes part-time. So I felt like that I just had to become more independent. And I think I did. My sister and I kind of felt the same way. We just became these independent kids.
Do you feel like it was forced on you a little bit just with the divorce and things like that?
I think a little bit. Yeah, I do. And Riverdale's is, for those who are outside of the New York area, and it's not Archie Comics because everyone thinks Riverdale's associated with Archie Comics. Oh, okay. So I think the guy that started the comics may have been from Riverdale, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
But Riverdale, it feels like a suburb of New York City. It's in the Bronx. It is actually just very close to a bridge that takes you into Upper Manhattan. And I felt it was a really great place growing up. I'm a product of the public schools of New York City. I did go to a very, very large high school. In New York City, you test into certain high schools, and with the top one being Stuyvesant High School, Bronx High School of Science, and then Brooklyn Tech. So I did not get into Stuyvesant or Bronx Science. Many of my friends did, which was tough on me. I did get into Brooklyn Tech, but to take the subway from where I lived in the Bronx to Brooklyn Tech was about an hour and a half each way. So just wasn't going to do that. So I ended up going to this massive high school where they bust in kids from all over the Bronx. Sure. And didn't really feel like I got a great education there. I was more scared than anything else. It was an inner city high school. It was 5,500 kids. It was 8 stories, escalators, metal detectors. The school is actually now defunct. It actually closed down because of poor performance. The building's still there, and they put in some magnet schools, but the school is now gone. But that actually, it was kind of tough. I really didn't understand the type of high school experience that I missed until I went to a summer program at Cornell University, where we were able to take college courses for credit in between your junior and senior year of high school. And after, being with kids who were from the suburbs and other parts of the country who had a better high school experience than I did, because I was basically in and out of school. I did no extracurricular activities, never felt safe. And I learned that I missed out on a lot of the high school experience.
Was it your sister? You had a sister, right?
I have a sister, yeah.
Okay. Did she go to the same high school?
She didn't. She actually tested into another school, which I didn't mention, for musical talent. It was the High School of Music and Art, which is known primarily for the TV show and movie Fame. It's based on the experience of that high school. So my sister was a singer and a performer, and she never followed that in life, but it was a good way for her to get out of, not going to that high school.
Was that hard given that, so you've got a divorce, you're dealing with a divorce. It's you and your sister who are sort of part of this family. And then you guys have to split in how close in age were you guys?
We're 2.5 years apart in age and 2 years in school.
So not crazy, like far apart, you could have conceivably been in school together. Was that tough back then, or was that something you guys were like excited about?
No, I think we would have been excited about it. My sister and I were not very close growing up. We've become much closer now, but she maybe was because of the divorce and we kind of acted our different ways. She started hanging out with a different crowd from from like a different part of our town, and I didn't. And just our friend groups were a lot different. So we were friendly, but we weren't very close as siblings.
Right. Okay. I have a very similar feel. Growing up, we were close as brothers. I'm one of 3. One of them works for me now, right? So it's we're clearly close in that respect. But certainly, it wasn't close in the way that I like my wife's family, right? Like in terms of how their siblings are close, it's just a totally different experience. So I liken myself almost more to your side of it. And actually, I was my father. My parents are married, but I was the second family that you're talking about, right? So my dad had 2 kids before meeting my mom and marrying my mom and having us. So like I'm on actually the other shoe, which also was, we were talking about this the other night. That's got its own dynamic as well, that I think I never assumed affected me through life and sort of decisions I made and all that. And I couldn't even tell you what those things are, but I think it does lead to a little bit of my independence and my wanting to sort of plant my flag in the ground, if that makes any sense to you at all. Like, no, I'm here. Like, I'm like, this is, and I was the beneficiary of that. So I could only imagine how hard it was on you and your sister.
Yeah, it was. You don't really, I was young when my parents got divorced. I was 5. My sister was 7. Okay. And I still remember that moment because I remember my father and mother brought us to their bedroom, sat us down on their bed, and explained that they were getting divorced. And my sister started crying hysterically. And I didn't know what divorce meant.
Yeah, you didn't know what it was.
I know what it meant, but she did. And then, of course, you learn that you learn what it was, obviously. And but interestingly and positively, my dad visited a lot. My parents are still friends. They never really hated each other. They always got along. Yeah. Both got remarried, and both are long time remarried.
And so he lived near. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but he lived nearby then, right?
It was actually about 40 to 45 minutes away.
Okay. I equate that to nearby because our situation was like 5 hours away.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So it wasn't one of those things where you could just pop in at any given time. So yeah, that's why I asked specifically. What did Dad do for a living?
Dad still does. He's a psychologist.
Oh, cool.
He taught psychology, and actually he also started his own practice, which is an entrepreneur in himself, because that could be a risky endeavor. But
for sure.
He's been practicing for over 50 years. He's still practicing today. Wow. He spends about 3 months or 4 months in Florida. And he still sees his patients. He does all phone sessions.
Sure.
And he's got a thriving practice.
That's awesome.
And my sister is a psychologist also.
Oh, okay. So she followed in the footsteps. Yeah. I gotta get the whole family on. I gobble up all the psychology talk. I can't get enough. It's like every other book I read is somehow trying to analyze myself, From the inside out. So
I'm kind of the black sheep of the family because there's a lot of educational people in my family. I also have an uncle that was a psychologist. My mother's a teacher or was a teacher. Actually still tutors today. She tutors kids, younger kids for elementary school on a part-time basis. And I'm the finance guy. I'm like the only one. And of course I get the questions from my parents all the time. What exactly do you do?
You do.
And they still kind of get it, but not 100%. But that's okay. And
that's okay. They don't have to know. I grew up in this commercial finance world and I had no idea what my dad did for all those many years. I assumed it was something nefarious, but turns out it wasn't. So you headed to Syracuse then after high school. I mean, big school, well-known school. Was it something you always wanted to do? Was it just sort of the next step? What was that like?
It was the wrong school for me.
Interesting. I like that answer.
My high school didn't really have guidance counselors because most of the kids in my school didn't go to college. Right. So there may have been a guidance counselor, but I never met with one. I basically took the Barron's book for all of you people who are, my age or my ageist, kind of paged through and picked schools that looked like decent. I really didn't know if I wanted large, small, or, geographic location. It came down to between Syracuse and Tulane, which is in New Orleans. Yeah. And I really had my kind of heart set on Tulane. They actually offered some money, which was helpful. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mother coming into my room almost in tears saying, "You can't go to Tulane. It's too far away." Oh, yeah. So I went to Syracuse and I felt like I got a decent education. But it was huge. It was really, really big. It's known for its Greek life. I was not in the fraternity. Right. I did have a really good group of friends and I majored in economics. And my ultimate goal was to become a stockbroker, which is now a financial advisor. So I was, taking all my courses and, my graduation was set for May of 1988. And as for, again, people who are older would know, in October of 87 was a pretty significant stock market crash. I should say so. None of the big brokers, broker-dealer firms were hiring. And you start interviewing for those types of jobs, right around then, maybe January or February. No one was hiring. So I felt like, well, what do I do? Right. Because to be honest, I was not a great student. I didn't have great grades because I assumed I would have my own book of business as a financial advisor. That's still kind of following that entrepreneurial, type of way of life. So I ended up not finding a job when I graduated from college. Went with a couple of buddies and we backpacked through Europe for about 2 months, which was phenomenal in itself. And it was pretty common to do it.
I was going to say backpacking through Europe back in those days. Yeah, a lot of people did it, but wasn't it a completely different experience? Like right now, I could stand in the middle of anywhere in Europe and FaceTime my family from my phone and see them. Back then, where you stay, how you communicate, all very different, I should say. Right? Yes. Those are pretty. I got to imagine a pretty moving experience in some way.
It was. I mean, I obviously saw things that were pretty phenomenal. Seeing the Mona Lisa and going to the Louvre, and but getting lost numerous times. I was actually just talking to a buddy of mine who still one of my closest friends who I went to college with and was with me on that tour. And, we were talking about, sleeping on the docks, outside of Athens for a night, waiting for a ferry to take us to the island of Eos, which is like the party island. And, and it was just, one of those experiences. You probably couldn't get away with that now, sleeping on I think it was a bench right by the docks. Yeah. And just because we couldn't really afford to, find a place to sleep at that time, and you just slept outside. And so we did that.
Yeah. But you probably can't get away with that now. But on the other side of that coin, like you said we had a chance to get lost. Like I don't think my kids, I have kids 10, 8 and 6 or 10, 8 and 5, almost 6. And I don't think they'll ever know what it's like to be lost.
You're right. My kids too. And my kids are older.
There's no way. If you've got a phone, if you've grown up in a world, you've never had to navigate your way somewhere. You've never had to, or let alone navigate your way, never had to find yourself somewhere that you thought you were. And then I have no map or any way to get myself around. What am I going to do? And kind of, as scary as that is, I mean, it's a benefit that I guess you can't be lost, but I guess there's some benefits to getting lost, isn't there?
I think so. You never know what you're going to run into. And some of our family trips as an adult and kids, we actually did get lost kind of on purpose in certain places. Like Venice is an example. It's an easy place to get lost. Yeah. And you never know what you're going to find in the maze that is Venice.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a very exciting time.
So you would say that was sort of the moment that put you on the trajectory to where you are today. So like, you thought you were going to go into stock brokering, all that kind of stuff. It's just funny how if you have these stories about people's lives and the trajectories they take, it is almost a rule that it's never the route anyone thought it was going to go. Right. And all of a sudden some outside force comes in and makes the stock market crash completely out of your control. But you need to make decisions in life, and then it takes you in a completely, I wouldn't say completely different route because you're in finance still. But do you think that, and then a combination maybe with this trip, is what sets you on a different path instead of just going back and trying again?
Well, I actually kind of did try again, but not necessarily the stockbroker, but something in finance. Mm-hmm. I ended up 2 summers while I was in Syracuse. I was able to get a summer job at NatWest Bank, National Westminster Bank brokerage. And I was, just doing random clerical stuff. Okay. And then one of the parts of the brokerage that I worked for was like a sales desk, but it was really order taking because today it's like all cross selling and selling everything. And in that day it was really just taking orders from a client, basically putting money in short-term investments like overnight or for a week. And basically you just took the order and you processed it and that was it. Right. I really didn't want to go back to that, but it was August of, I graduated in May. It was now August.
Yeah. You're back from Europe.
I'm back from Europe. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And I actually called the folks that I used to work with, during that summer job and said, by the way, do you have any jobs available? And they said, as a matter of fact, someone just left. Do you want to come interview? So I interviewed for the job and I got it. And it was still the same type of order taking job, but I was there full time. I got to know some of the clients, but while I was at the bank, I kind of learned how to self promote. And one thing that I actually did, I actually saved this here because I'm going to show it real quick.
For those watching online.
So whoever's watching, this is from the 1989 National Westminster Bank Annual Report.
That's not you, is it?
That is me with hair.
Oh boy.
So I marketed myself internally to the point where they asked me to be in the annual report.
There you go.
So my name got known within the bank. It was, it's a New York centric bank, but it was, pretty decent size and they had some specialized industries. I learned that the bank had a training program. And they were catering to like the Ivy League kids and kids that I could never compete with if I was just applying out of the blue. Sure. So I got to know the people that were interviewing for those roles and understanding the questions that they were asking and what they were looking for. And when it came time to interview, I was already kind of friends with them. So just to kind of give me a step up on everyone to think, well, maybe I can actually, get into this training program. And I did. And it was 19 people that they had chosen. I was one of the older kids because they took mostly kids right out of college.
Yeah.
So I was part of this group of 19 kids, and it was a very difficult training program for me. As an economics major, I didn't take any accounting classes. And the first 5 months of the training was accounting, and basically undergraduate accounting in the first month.
That's one way to get your education.
It really is. And there was 5 of us, including myself, who struggled. And we actually formed our own little study group, and we called ourselves the Strugglers. And for 16 months, we were the Strugglers. And there were kids from, one of the guys went to UPenn. One was kind of from more like just kind of like a regular kind of guy who didn't go to a great school, and we all kind of hung out together, our different backgrounds, and we studied together and struggled through and made it through. And during the credit training, we did rotations through different parts of the bank. And then you match at the end, like what was your first choice and what was their first choice. So one of the rotations that I did was in specialty lending, specialty finance lending, which is what
you're in now for everybody who doesn't know is what he's in now.
So
however many years later,
I matched with them. They matched with me, and I got my start doing, specialty finance lending at NatWest Bank. And that's what kind of led into where I am today. I've done specialty finance lending now, or specialty finance work at a bond rating firm, at a bond insurance firm, at an investment bank, at a commercial bank. But it's just interesting how I never really thought about lending. I mean, I wanted to be kind of like a Wall Street type of guy on a sales desk or a financial advisor or a broker.
Yeah.
But the fact that crash happened, which again was out of my control, all kind of led to where I am today.
Right. And for the lay people out there, do you want to give like a real layman's version of what specialty finance lending is?
Sure.
It's not just lending. It's lending to lenders. So, do you have a better answer than that?
Correct.
Maybe?
No, I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's what it is. So there are a handful of companies out there. Well, maybe I should step back. There's different kinds of specialty finance lending. You kind of break it into consumer and commercial. So there are companies out there that lend to consumers for cars, for student loans. And then there's others, commercial finance, which are, lending to companies to help them survive.
Like 12.5.
Like 12.5. So there's a lot of companies out there that are very small that can't get direct bank financing. They're too small. They don't have a good credit history. They just don't fit within a bank's type of mold. So there are quite a few finance companies out there that fit that hole to basically lend to smaller companies that really can't get lending from banks. So where I come in, or my group comes in, we finance these lenders. So they will provide, financing for equipment. They will provide financing for basically everything that a commercial entity needs. So it's a lucrative business because, as I said, there's just not a lot of banks out there that are lending to the small companies, and there needs to be these types of lenders that can fill that void. And
right. And if you've ever done any sort of interest-free financing as a consumer, or if you've ever done any sort of, you put your furniture on a 12-month program of some sort, there's some sort of specialty finance lender behind that product that is funding that product. It's not the retail shop doing that. And so not that that's specifically what you do, but just to give everyone that maybe isn't in our space kind of that idea. That's a good explanation. So I appreciate that.
And just to be really specific, because we finance only certain kinds of commercial lenders, because there are a fair amount of kind. So in Ryan's case, who owns a Factor, CEO of a Factor, we finance factoring companies. We finance asset-based lenders. So these are lenders that are secured lenders to other companies. Mm-hmm. And we finance equipment finance companies. And so those are really the niches that we find are kind of our bread and butter. There's different kinds out there that we perceive as being more risky. So those are the ones that we really focus on.
One thing I want to circle back to that I thought was interesting, because I'm listening to you describe this story and I'm thinking to myself, I don't see that happening today. And I don't know why, which is you getting with this group at this job to get together, the strugglers, to get together to study for this training program. Maybe it happens. I find it hard to believe the average 23, 24, 25-year-old today, just given the way people interact with each other nowadays with phones and this, that, and the other, getting together like that to have some sort of group seems pretty foreign. But if there's a lesson here for young employees at big organizations, it's, like you said, promoting yourself within. You have to be willing to stand up and promote yourself from within, but also pairing up with your coworkers and actually talking to them once in a while.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And I have all these really clear memories of just the five of us in this kind of little conference room, and spending many hours there, because a lot of the people who had an easier time of the classes, because we had classes pretty much every day. It's in accounting, and then it was money. It was like money and banking, and there was all these other classes that were above me. To be totally honest, we spent we were there till 9, 10 at night, pretty much every night, just making sure we got the assignments down. And it was intimidating, because it wasn't like a big lecture hall at college. It was 19 people, and the instructors were just calling on you. It wasn't like raise your hand if you know the answer. So
putting yourself out there for sure. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. But it was an incredibly rewarding experience.
Sure. And it set you on the path you are today, for sure.
Yeah. And a lot of banks had gotten rid of these training programs because a lot of the kids would take them and then leave and go someplace else and make more money. But a lot of them are back again. And I think they're finding, I don't know how they're holding on to people, but I'm sure they're incentivizing them to stay on.
For sure.
Because the bank that I work for currently has a pretty robust program too. And they also have
training
robust
program,
summer internship programs and full-time programs. And so
I think that's coming back. I think it's coming back. I think the idea, if there's anything about this generation that is maybe different, I mean, there's a lot of things different than maybe your generation or generation before that even, is they want to feel like they're being invested in. And one of these training programs feels like they've been invested in. And candidly, you talk to people coming out of college, they're like, yeah, I graduated, but like, I don't really know what I'm doing. It's almost like that was worthless in some respects. So sometimes there's this, like, it's almost like you're getting your master's program at the place you're working at. So, pretty interesting there. You talked about working till 9, 10 at night. Obviously at a young age, we're able to pull those things off, but you and I have talked in the past a lot about family and balance and or lack thereof. Right. And so, I'm fascinated because I'm impressed by what a father you are and all that. And in the finance market, it's one of, generally speaking, it's almost a rule that, you work late hours, your family comes second, that sort of thing. Now, you pivoted a little bit away from the typical model of that, but how did you navigate that, building a family, growing a family, all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's interesting. My father always reminds me that I told him, or very early on in my career, is that I wanted to have a balance. And I don't know if I was mature or had just spoken to someone who was killing themselves at work every day, but I wanted to have a balance. I didn't want to work, 12, 14 hours a day, every day, and just miss out on everything. So I was able to navigate finding jobs that required some late hours, but didn't really kill me. Mm-hmm. And so that meant not going to a big investment bank, not having a place where their FaceTime was required. And so
sacrificing dollars too, let's be honest. Right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's trade-offs in life. Yeah. There's trade-offs in life. We have I have a buddy who's an attorney, and it's like weighing the 80-hour work weeks for a couple $100,000 more or $100,000 more, or work a normal life, raise a normal family, but you make less. I mean, there's trade-offs in everything in life. And I just find it fascinating because it's easy. Seems like to me, the thing that we've been ingrained with as a society for many years is you take the money, whatever that else you have to do for it, you take the money. You don't opt for the other thing. And I find it interesting because you, in the 80s and 90s, that the idea of work-life balance wasn't a thing. Nowadays, every employee wants it. Every employee says it. It's table stakes if you're hiring to provide your average 25-year-old with a work-life balance so they can start their families or do whatever they want to do. But kudos for you for thinking, I need to have this balance. Did your dad work? Well, I guess he was a psychologist, so I'm not sure what their hours are, but I was just curious if any of that came from rebelling against that or wanting to have like a family unit or something like that.
Well, I think a couple of points, and the first one being, not having a father living at home with you. I wanted to be home for my kids. I wanted to be
there. You go.
I wanted to be there. And so I think that may have been one of the drivers early on. But in my head, and one thing I always wanted to do through work was travel and have the opportunity to see different parts of the country and the world. So I was willing to sacrifice a couple of days away from travel and maybe miss some things. There was one job that I had at a bond insurance company. It was called XL Capital Assurance, and then changed its name to Syncora Guarantee. That whole industry kind of disappeared in 2008, but I was there from 2001 to 2008 and had international responsibilities. So I probably had never have ended up in Asia, but had to go to Seoul, Korea numerous times. I went to Tokyo numerous times. Had different transactions in Central America, in Europe. So got to see a nice chunk of the world through work, which is great, and I still enjoy doing that today. The business I'm in now is national, so I do get to travel throughout the country, and I think that travel bug actually rubbed off on my kids because I also enjoy personal travel as well, and my wife does. My wife does as well. So we started taking the kids on nice vacations when they were about 11 and 9, respectively. So we've taken them to some pretty fun places, like to Morocco. We went to Costa Rica. We've been to Hawaii. We've been to Czech Republic, something like every year when they were growing up. And my older son, studied abroad he went to school up in Boston, studied abroad in Madrid, and became a traveler, like a real official traveler. My younger son also really just loves traveling. He missed studying abroad because of COVID, but travel is a big part of all of our lives.
Sounds like it sounds like it's a big part of your life. And I certainly think I was listening to somebody the other day on a podcast talk about raising kids and about where they go to things like travel abroad and all that, and how important it is, especially in the climate we're in now, where we think everyone is other, everyone is so different than us. And so to be able to see different parts of the world, not just the artifacts, but the actual people of that world, and that they're similar to us, but they're different in other ways, I think it sounds like it was a thoughtful decision you were making as you were raising kids to do that. Yeah.
And I think it's rubbed off on them too. Neither of them want to be in finance. Neither of them want to go to law school and be lawyers. They're really carving their own paths. And, wherever it ends, obviously they'll always have our support. And as long as they can self-sustain, which they are doing now, they're 24 and 22. They're, living on their own and paying their own way, not looking for any support.
I like it.
That was
no
also
handouts.
That was something that was ingrained in them early on too, is that, we live in a nice town where a lot of kids get pretty much everything they want.
Sure.
And we consciously, told them it's not going to be like that for you. You're going to have to pay your way. You're going to have jobs, and, they had jobs over the summer and they paid their own way for everything, and they continue to do so. Yeah. And I think it's smart. Makes you a stronger person.
For sure. My wife and I talk all the time about how, we've been lucky enough to be relatively successful, and certainly, my parents did better than their parents did. And from a financially speaking, I don't mean in terms of raising them, but financially speaking, it's gone the right direction for the generation as you would hope it would. And, the idea you grow up thinking, I want to provide a better life for my kids than I had. Right. And that's sort of the goal there. But that's a double-edged a little bit, I guess, maybe, or two-sided coin, which is, okay, but if life continues to get easier for them and there's less challenges for them, things like that. Like, how do you balance that? Giving, being generous and happy with, and giving to your kids with the successes you've had in life, but not overdoing it. And I'm sure it's some sort of pendulum where you land right in the middle and there's some sort of moderation there. But it sounds like, forcing kids to get jobs, and that's hard too nowadays. I mean, I started working when I was 14 years old at a pizza place, and I had to go to my school. You talk about guidance counselors. I went to a lot of similar schools as you in some ways. And I had to get a worker's permit from the school. Not just my parents saying I could work, but at 14, I had to get a worker's permit from my school. Like, you never hear about that anymore. You never, and sometimes it's not the kid's fault. There's crazy amounts of homework, crazy amounts of expectations, crazy amounts of sports and extracurriculars just to get into places like college. So it's a weird dynamic for balancing all that,
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think my kids are the better for that.
Sure.
But I think that, the kids today also are under a lot more pressure than we were. We talk about that. And you just, with the competition of getting into colleges and, certainly different from when we were doing all that. But I feel bad for kids these days, to be honest. Yeah. It's just a lot more pressure these days. And
definitely,
it's definitely
always
tough
on.
growing up.
Always on. They can never be bored. They always have to be doing something. Yeah, it's a tough deal. Just pivoting a little bit away from family,
Sure.
Thank you for all the time today, but I got a few other business related questions that I thought you'd be thoughtful to ask here. So you've had a chance to finance many businesses or finance lenders to other businesses of all walks of life in your career. With all that history, is there a through line that you see that sets apart a successful business from not? And I'm sure there's a ton to that, but like, is there something in your mind that along the way you're like, I've always noticed that?
Yeah, well, I think the key in our type of business, and maybe any type of business, is, we're lending to people, and we are basically focusing on the people who we're going to be talking to on a daily basis. Are they good people? Are they honest? Are they doing the right thing? If something comes up that, needs discussion, are they going to pick up the phone right away and discuss it with us? They're not going to hide anything from us. And that is first and foremost in our line of business. And again, and maybe your business as well, and maybe every business, but we are extremely selective. People comes first, and then you look at obviously all the numbers and all that. And there are times when, you find the people you really want to work with, but it just doesn't work out for other reasons, and you feel bad, but that's the way it goes. But first and foremost, it is the people. And that is number one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets lost a lot. I mean, we're becoming, we're supposedly more connected than ever, but I feel like we're actually more disconnected than ever as a society and as a people. So it's interesting that that's the through line that you see there, and it's almost like that gets even more difficult. So I appreciate that. I'm always curious though too. So we've already talked about, you've been through multiple iterations of economic turmoil, let's say, whether it's a crash or a recession or this last one. What, not just lending businesses like ours, but what should businesses be focused on right now?
Sticking to their knitting. I mean, it's an expression I learned a long time ago. I'm actually not a big fan of that expression, but it seems to work very well. Is don't go doing things you wouldn't do in any type of economic environment. Don't go stretching, reaching on things because you think you're going to make money, but it's a little bit risky. Basically, keep doing the same things that you're doing, and it all should work out. Because you don't want to find yourself a company in default. You don't want to find yourself, dealing with real, hardships and turmoil. I mean, it's not fun. I always think back to like 2008 when, a lot of financial institutions were doing things they should have never done.
Right.
And I think they knew that things were eventually, the music was going to stop, but didn't really think about the effects on other people. And, cause I worked at a bond insurance firm at the time, and we were insuring these subprime mortgage bonds. And we thought they looked okay, but the ones originating them, I'm sure knew they were not great, but we did our diligence. But I ended up losing my job,
Yeah.
That whole industry disappeared. I
Right.
mean, that's another discussion point is, for the viewers out there is, handling job loss, because
Right.
this is a considered, I guess, a downturn. There are a
Yeah.
lot of companies out there letting people go and dealing with that.
Hmm.
It happened to me twice,
Yeah.
and, having a family and being the sole breadwinner, you lose your job, and it's
Yep.
panic mode. It's
Yeah.
absolute panic mode,
Yeah.
but
You can go into a dark place,
you
with that.
can very easily.
I've been fortunate not to. I mean, I've been let go from jobs in the long time ago, but I started my business right before the '08 crisis and things like that. So I was okay in terms of watching that happen. But it is interesting right now with these job losses and sort of the resetting of the labor market out there. You look back, I mean, a lot of people have heard this, but you look back at all these different crises or these different periods of turmoil, and the amount of fascinating and incredible businesses that are started out of it. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that comes out of people who are losing their jobs, feeling that panic a little bit and saying, you know what, never again am I relying on somebody else to pay my bills. Basically,
Right.
I'm not relying on that anymore. I'm going to take what I do well, and I'm going to do it on my own. Because I was going to push back on you a little bit, because you said stick to your knitting, and I've also seen, though, that coming out of as the economy roars back, so do these fascinating businesses that come out of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's interesting to me, like maybe it's a little bit of both. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
a little bit of if you know what you're doing and you've done it for a while, stick to what you're doing, but don't be afraid if things aren't going the right way. Sometimes it is okay to quit. Sometimes it is okay to say, this isn't working anymore. I've got a better solution here. I just need to move the ball forward on it.
Yeah. But, I give you a lot of credit for going out on your own, because, the times I have lost my job, it crossed my mind to do something on my own,
Mm-hmm.
but I just didn't feel that it was the right time. And I don't know if I didn't have the confidence in myself or just was more in panic mode, but always felt like I kind of needed an institution behind me.
Sure.
And finding that perfect medium was trying to start my own lender finance business at another bank, which I've done now twice. So I did that at my prior institution. I actually got into this proper lender finance business in 2008. I was fortunate enough to find a job when most people were letting go people, and through just networking and getting to know people, found a credit or underwriting job at a lender finance shop, one of the biggest ones in the country. Learned the business, got confident in myself, and then started starting a lender finance business at another bank. And that's how I ended up at another bank for about 5.5 years doing the lender finance business, which again, at this institution started up with a former colleague of mine from that original bank. Now 3.5 years, we're, going strong, and it's entrepreneurial. It feels entrepreneurial. Obviously you've got things you have to do as a bank to, to keep the business going, but we feel that it's actually fun. We're actually having fun doing what we're doing. And you don't hear that a lot when you're working at a bank, because it does feel entrepreneurial, because it's your business. It's your baby.
Yeah. I think the lesson there is that, going out completely on your own is not for everybody. It isn't. And I don't mean that to toot my horn, because I will tell you, I was 23 years old, going on 24. You got all the confidence in the world at that point. There's you got nothing to lose. You're not married yet. You don't have kids yet. So I certainly think it would be a harder decision where I sit today. Maybe not, because I've been through it as long as I have, but, so I do think it's not for everybody, but I do think you can be entrepreneurial within places. And I think people lose that a lot. There's a big fear of rocking the boat, or there's a big fear of not, of not having of not thinking you have the opportunity, because you don't take that spark, that whatever spark you have, and bring it into your company. You feel like you either have to do it on your own or you can't do it at all. And I think there is a medium there, like you're talking about. So I think that's a lesson, not just for our space, but just all employees out there. generally speaking, I know for my business, I'll speak for my business. I would love it if one of my employees came to me and said, here's my idea. Here's what I want to start. I need support. So I want to do it here. Can we be partners on this within the business? That's something that I think a lot of business owners want to hear, for sure.
Yeah.
No doubt. All right. Well, appreciate it. I don't want to take all of your afternoon here. So this is our final questions. We call them the fast four.
Okay.
4 questions. You don't think hard on these. These are like, as fast as you can. And there's no wrong answer. So other than what you're doing right now, what other profession or business would you like to take a stab at?
Wow. Good question. Something in the wine business.
Okay, cool. I was going to say something, I don't know, travel-y, food, wine. So
well,
I was going to, yeah.
Well, because actually, just to be a little more specific, I've always thought of going back to becoming a sommelier.
Yeah. Okay.
And then traveling throughout the world, tasting different wines, and then ended up being like a consultant. So
there you go.
That's kind of where I was headed.
There's still time.
There is. My nose still works.
That's
still
right.
Works.
Exactly. Still works for now. Okay. Next, what's something you're terrible at?
Lying.
Not good at lying.
I can't lie.
That's a good one.
Liar.
That's a good one to be terrible at.
Yeah.
What book or what book are you reading right now, or what documentary have you most recently watched?
Most recent documentary I watched was about PepsiCo when they offered an airplane to, I don't know I forgot the exact name. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
It's oh God. Oh, it's Pepsi. You owe me a plane or something like that. It's
okay. About, I haven't heard of this.
Okay. A true life story of a guy that, was watching a commercial. You get a certain amount of points. And you can get stuff at Pepsi. You buy shirts and stuff like that. And then they jokingly at the end of the commercial said, you can also have this Harrier jet for 7 million points. It was obviously a joke, but there was no disclaimer. So this guy went after Pepsi to try and get the Harrier jet.
Did he get all 7 million points?
He did.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to I'll give it away.
Don't spoil it.
I won't give it away, but he did get the points. But it's a fun documentary to watch. So.
Oh, cool. That's a good one. I like that. And then if you have to look at your phone or whatever, you can for this one. What's the last thing you listened to on Spotify or Apple Music?
The last thing you listened to?
Yeah. What's the last thing you listened to? Or on whatever, could be a podcast, could be anything.
The last thing. It's usually a song, kind of a mellow song that's in my mellow kind of playlist. Beautiful. Yeah, I like it. That's it.
Cool. Well, Steve, thank you for spending time with us today. It's been super fun and educational. Get to know you a little more. Hopefully our people have some good takeaways from this. Where can people find you online and get in touch?
They can find me. I'm Instagram, Zorn927. That's a whole other story of that name. But
we're going to put that in the show notes. Don't worry.
I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm also on Facebook.
Awesome.
And you can find me and reach out and say hi, and feel free to just give me a wave. Awesome. Well, thanks, Steve Katz. Thanks for being on the show. Always a pleasure, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. Okay. Bye-bye.